No mai haere mai. Welcome to Farmers in the Field, where our Earthworker alumni share their regenerative organic horticulture projects. Join us in co-learning through these biology-first conversations and growing radical hope through food. You can hear about our mentors in episode 1. Come join us.
Kia ora, I'm Sarah Smuts-Kennedy, vision holder of For the Love of Bees. I'm excited to be here with Daniel Schuurman and Levi Brinsdon-Hall as we share a little bit about our journey on how we came to be mentors on the Earthworkers Programme and Farmers in the Field. So my journey as a grower began in 2009 when I purchased this piece of land in Maharangi West, intentionally to learn how to heal the landscape through growing food. It started as a barren paddock. This is a photograph of it probably a couple of years in, on engineered clay compacted driveway, which I progressively turned through composting and growing plants into something that now is a really luscious, regenerative, very disease resistant food growing environment. This is what it looks like in spring, just as the blossoms come on. And it's been a really amazing experience in really coming to understand in a deep way the power of photosynthesis and microbes to actually heal the landscape. And very, very quickly. I grow all of the vegetables and fruit that I eat grown on this piece of land. One of our really important values of the Earthworkers course is that you are only taught by people who have actually walked the talk, who have actually practiced in real time the systems that we teach. Obviously, having that opportunity to do that on my own land has been really important, but really a big part of what I have done is take that learning into the wider Auckland area. First starting in 2014 with a project called The Park with another artist called Aotearoa, and collectively we brought bees into the inner city for the first time without having a fence around them. And we invited the wider Auckland region to learn with us about how to create a city safe for bees. It was a really exciting project. It lasted a year. As you can see, we had what we call pasture paintings, and in the photograph there, you can see the one that was in a hexagonal shape in Victoria Park, but there were 6 others around the wider perimeter of the city, which the bees could fly to and forage from. But one of the major disappointments of that project was that people loved it, but they didn't really participate. So in 2016, when I was invited by the Auckland Design Office, by Auckland Council, to do another project, a really important part of this new artwork was that I, as an artist, couldn't make anything. All I could do was use my enthusiasm, my imagination to help the rest of the wider community to develop the capacities to create a world that we want to live in. And our first regenerative organic teaching site was between the 2 office buildings, council office buildings in Wellesley Street, called Griffith Gardens. And this photograph is a really special event that we did during the course of 4 years, I think we were there, which was the launch of the Urungua Garden and the unveiling of 3 po that were carved, facilitated by an urban Māori community called Awhina Mai Tata Katoa. That site was so successful that we were offered another site in about 2018 at the top of Simon Street by the City Rail Link. In Griffith Gardens, of course, we really learnt how to engage with the community, how to socialize these ideas, how to bring multiple different communities on a journey of thinking about our behavior in the wider ecosystem and how we could change our practices to enable them to become very practical and very effective in creating fast change. We taught high school students, we taught project managers, nurses, anyone off the street. And we created these kind of mechanisms for communicating our optimism and the skills that we collectively were learning together. Here are our beautiful posters. created by school students and also by our beautiful designer, Phil Kelly. This is a picture of the Auckland Design Office coming to our farm, which 10 of us imagined together and put together the infrastructure to kind of roll it out. It was really meant to be a community learning experience. We didn't know whether or not we could create a farm on such a small site. We certainly didn't know how many people we could feed off that site every week, or whether or not it would create the revenue to create jobs for people. It was really exciting to have the Auckland Design Office come to the site several years after we'd activated it, when we really had learnt what are the systems that enable those, those key self-sustainable things to happen, where you are growing enough food to feed people. Currently, we're feeding 43 different CSAs off the site every week at the moment. We're paying 1.5 farmers from the income that is generated from those CSAs, so community-supported agricultural systems. But more importantly, all of the food that we're selling every week is fast-tracking the rehabilitation of those sites. You can grow food, but you don't always grow food, healing ecosystems, and that has always been the priority For the Love of Bees. We have done a lot of advocacy work over the last 6 years. Here are photographs of me talking on television on World Bee Day, running advocacy events for multiple different communities, including our own communities. And of course, here is a really important one. We were advocating for organic weed control in the inner city. All these practices that actually can be measured through the safety and health of a bee colony, that ultimately create an ecosystem that's also really important for humans to be safe, and soil microbes essentially, which is really, they are the enabler of the fast tracking of ecosystem recovery. Coming back to my own site, the first Earthworkers program, we did the last day actually at my own teaching farm. And here we are, the first 35 of us learning together in my studio. I also happen to be a practicing artist and exhibiting artist, and it was beautiful to be able to open my studio for the day to facilitate the learning for our Earthworkers program. We now have 114 alumni that we're supporting through the Earthworkers program. It's not just a 5-day course that you come and do. It's also it's a beginning of networking you to a much larger community who have really started their journey thinking around how can food production fast track resilience of our soil systems and of our communities and of our farmers. We all need to be eating. We all eat hopefully 3 meals a day. And we want that food to be grown in a way that's fast tracking climate change mitigation and adaptation. And lastly, my role within For the Love of Bees is to really support the socialization of the ideas that we are teaching. I have learnt those processes myself. I have practiced those processes myself, but really my function is to share these ideas and these concepts so that we can actually spread them out as quickly as possible. While we're teaching urban farms, the idea is that the urban farms are spaces which kind of function as an amplifier to accelerate the take-up of these practices at a commercial scale. So, I was really delighted to be invited by Whakaora to speak at their recent event, where we're able to share this information with urban planners, engineers, architects, project managers, other artists. It's going to require all of us upskilling. We really need to, in order to plan for the future, we actually need to understand how these systems work so that we can integrate them in a real and holistic way. The Earthworkers program really endeavours to give you that bigger picture and marry it and merge it with a deep ecology knowledge, biology knowledge, chemistry knowledge, and then actually the business end of what enables a project to be self-sustainable. It's our vision that these projects create a new economy for the next generation of practitioners who are going to be really excited about how food production is the fastest healing agent that we have. We did the first Farmers in the Field in the first COVID lockdown. It was so amazing to see how those learnings and those very few farms that we visited accelerated learning across the whole of our community. We're so excited to now be able to revisit the Farmer in the Field program with our 114 alumni already out there in the field practicing it. These Farmers in the Field are an opportunity for us to touch base with those alumni who choose to participate in this Farmers in the Field program and to get some in-depth insights from our mentors and also to encourage them on their project. And not only that, they become your greatest teachers. The people who are learning and practicing every day are the ones who have the most to offer. And we're really excited how this forum is enabling us to access their learning and share it with you.
Hi, I'm Daniel Schuurman. I'm one of the mentors for the Earthworkers program. I'm excited to be mentoring in the Farmers in the Field series. I'm going to give you an overview of how I became a regenerative agronomist. I grew up in horticulture. I spent my whole life in horticulture and agriculture, from living and growing up on a nursery and in the farming community, following through to education and to Massey University. And we were taught to grow plants using the typical chemical approach, the agrochemicals, which is loaded in fertilizers and then followed up with fungicides and pesticides as the modern, the latest way to grow. The pictures that I show you here were some examples of what the soil and the plants looked like when we grew that way. On the left-hand side, the part I want people to focus on is lower down in the plant. You can see lots of smaller and yellow and brown leaves. And these are all a result basically of excess soil salinity, nutrition, overloaded soil systems, and the plants essentially dumping those salts and dropping those lower leaves. And the upper leaves are smaller and not necessarily doing so well, and often coated with fungicides and pesticides. The soil on the right-hand side of the picture is showing you salt buildup and the algal growth and other things that occurred in soils in those early days. And I started to look for solutions basically to remove agrochemicals out of the program, because in many cases resistance was building up so high we were having to spray instead of more than weekly, sometimes twice weekly, and still suffering disease losses in this crop, which is the transition crop that I learned to grow on, which was greenhouse roses. Part of the solution that we found was in learning to embrace beneficial microbial organisms to help the plant's immune system, and particularly to replace the use of fungicides to control fungal diseases. And so our first part of that program was to look at what was available in the microbial community. And one of the things we discovered is that in the early days, those microbes were expensive to use, so we had to find ways of finding more economic ways of building up the amount of beneficial microbes that we can use, because it was soon obvious to us that it was a numbers game that we had to, when we started learning about things like quorum sensing. Now these are all sorts of things that we teach in the Earthworkers course and that we use in everyday work and in consultancy and advice on growing programs. And part of this program was learning how to brew. And hopefully that short video will run now. And so basically brewing up, so multiplying organisms, so taking small numbers of beneficial organisms and creating massive amounts, where it was one of the key tools we learned to decreasing the cost of using microbials. One of the things that we do very differently in this place, it may be that someone brewing microbials at home, is that we manage everything from temperature to pH to the inoculums that we use to the food recipes that we use, the length of time that we brew them for. All of these things have been learned and developed over many years with experience. These slides are of the I said the first crop that we started trying to learn how to remove the agrochemical and to utilize the science that we'd found or we're learning about with beneficial microbes and nutrition and understanding how we had got so many of these things wrong, as I said, was in rose crops. And these are crops that were growing year round and sprayed, I said, every week, sometimes twice a week, with fungicides and pesticides. So they're one of the most sprayed crops that you can imagine. And what we created, or what we discovered over a number of years, was we learned how to actually grow these crops without any of those traditional pesticides, and we reduced the fertilizer use by about 80%. And we grew far better, healthier, more productive crops, in this case rose crops in greenhouses, than we were ever able to under the conventional program of fungicides and pesticides. So once the plant was released from all those toxic chemicals, that they actually grew far better. And it became much more economic to actually grow them this way. We're not only producing a better crop, but so we took that lesson and we started applying it to other crops. And one of the early crops that we started working with was kiwi fruit, and we applied exactly the same principles to crops like kiwi fruit, where again there were an increasing PSA came along in this journey. And we came in after the PSA sort of problem had hit the kiwi fruit industry, and started to teach them that, once again, they suddenly were relying on huge amounts of fungicides and increasing levels of pesticides in an industry where they had really not had to use those too much previously. And so we started to apply the same lessons that we learned in the greenhouse in terms of microbials and nutrition to these outdoor crops. And we have been working with kiwi fruit crops now for well over a decade, and very, very successful in following the same principles. But in this case, we're only really talking about, this is to show the difference. On the left-hand side, the grass is growing better than on the right. And we haven't actually added any fertilizer. All we've added is beneficial microbes and the food that feeds the microbes. So there was some fulvic acid and species of kelp there, basically to supply the microbes with the necessary food sources, so they could then improve the soil conditions underneath those plants and make more of the soil nutrition available, which is the sort of differences. So all we've done here is it's nothing about nutrition, essentially adding nutrition. It's about improving the microbial performance of the soil. Here's exactly the same thing here, but on a larger scale. We've got before and after pictures, but the change can be incredibly rapid. Just a single application of those beneficial microbials, and the grass is going from a paddock that really never grew much at all. It had been rotary hoed and leveled up and made ready. At one stage, we're going to put a marquee in that spot, and the grass had suffered ever since. And it was just a simple waking up of the microbial system in that soil to get it to actually start to grow. Same thing here. This is on another property. This is, in this case, it was up in Auckland, and this is in the midsummer, and these were bordering paddocks. And it just shows you the stark reality of something that's an active growth with the soil system is functioning, the carbon cycle. And again, all we put here is there was no actual fertilizer involved in this process. It was just beneficial microbes that we'd been applying to the pasture, and only a couple of applications leading up to this summer made all this sort of difference. Once again, it was just an example of at one of our staff had tried. They decided that they would use a watering can and try and write biologics in the hillside, and again, all they did was use that same microbial recipe, and it just jumps out. But it's 6 months later, you can read it. It's still the difference, still that stark, you know, for quite long periods of time. Here this isn't just about microbials. Curly leaf is an example of fungal disease that attacks a lot of pip and stone fruit. And often the only answer that conventional agriculture has is to apply copper fungicides or various different fungicide recipes, essentially to try to control it. But in truth, the plant's immune system, like in the case of copper fungicide, is often it's a little bit of copper that's getting into the plant that boosts the plant's immune system, which actually makes the difference. It's not actually the toxic copper fungicide that stops the pathogen or disease-forming organism. It's actually the nutritional element that boosts the plant's immune system that allows the plant to actually recover from this disease. And so what we did in this instance is we used the copper nutrition approach, which we'd seen a lot of research on, and we had various different products to try that showed the example of a massive increase in efficacy, so the effectiveness of using the nutritional approach rather than the fungicide approach, and you get vastly better results without the copper toxicity. So we can use, it's still copper, but it's copper by nutrition, and this was an amino chelated copper that we made up. So that basically means that the plant can absorb that copper nutrition without burning it. And this was the immediate result after a single application. But we could often, this is a broader view of the same tree, and traditionally, if you could actually see the entire tree, you'd see plant leaves damage off to the right, leaves damage off to the left, and we'd only sprayed the center part of this tree to see if it would affect all the tree or only part of the tree, and the effect was massive. But it was only where we'd actually sprayed it. So wherever we hadn't sprayed, the plant is, so it's quite a localized effect in terms of you need to treat the whole plant to get the nutrition up to boost the plant's immune system. But the amazing thing for single application of this is the following year we could still see the same results on this tree. Where we'd sprayed it, we had no curly leaf. The plant's immune system was still functioning very healthily, but where we hadn't sprayed it, we got curly leaf again. So, but it does show you the incredible length of time that a single application can last, and it's just purely getting the nutrition right to deal with some of these diseases. And it's never about fungicides. Another crop we've been working with is grapes and viticulture, and we'd had trials for a number of years where we again did the same thing. We'd applied the same microbial and nutritional approach. Unfortunately, here we hadn't been able to convince the grower to stop using herbicides as well, which would have been an advantage because they have a huge negative effect on the soil health. But even so, we were able to grow these crops, again, without using the massive amounts of fungicides that get used, often sulfur and copper and a range of different things in fungicidal form to try and control things like powdery mildew and botrytis. And here we were just simply doing it with foliar nutrition, with exactly the same program that we use on many of the other crops, which is beneficial organisms with the supported nutrition to make sure that the plant and the microbes have everything that they need. I started mentoring with the For Love of Bees right back in the beginning of the OMG garden in the top of Simon Street there that many of you will have heard about or be familiar with. And my role there as a mentor was always not only about the soil health and the overall and crop program health, it was also about helping them explore possibilities on the site, and to constantly push the boundaries of how much and what they thought they could produce on the site, and try to fill every last inch and millimeter of that site, and to constantly look at how we could maximize its production. And that was together with Levi and Sarah and now Jake. Mentoring and advice has gone on for quite a number of years in various different projects with the For Love of Bees. And here's a range of different places where we've talked in the Ellen Melville Centre. The top one on the right there is actually in my own garden here in Blenheim, where we got all together to meet, talk about the urban farming movement in New Zealand, and start making some plans to work together. And then it's evolved into some of the more practical roles in Earthworkers, and things like the master classes. And a number of years ago, pre-COVID, with our meeting with Healthy was there in Auckland, kind of kicked a lot of this off. Here's an example of masterclass that we've done with the For Love of Bees. This one was particularly around helping people understand their soil results, and the before and after type of pictures that we can see with soils that we've worked with for a number of years, to see the progression and get people to understand it. Another part of that masterclass was getting a recognition from some of the science that's been done around the world. Now, I can't recall off the top of my head at the moment exactly who this was that produced this work. I know it comes out of New Mexico University. But essentially what we're looking at here is a graph that is showing us the difference between what the total biomass, so the amount of growth that's achieved per square meter per year in traditional cultivated land. You can see on the left you've got tropical rainforest, cultivable land, transitional, advanced, and swampland marsh. And what it means by cultivated land is our traditional growing. It's actually we actually, even our traditional chemical growing processes really lack true productivity. We think they're productive, but in terms of, you look at the tropical rainforest, is like 3 times more productive. Swamp and marshland, is more or less that sort of 3 times more productive. What we're looking in terms of transitional is when we start taking that biological process, regenerative organic growing principles, and we start applying it to our crops, we very rapidly achieve sort of similar levels to what nature achieves, because we follow that. But then when we work with nature and really help to enhance that that natural productivity that's there, we can achieve huge levels of productive growth out of the same space. And the effect there is almost 7 times what we were achieving previously in cultivated land. So it was an extremely interesting piece of research, but it's been borne out to me in looking at growing and growing systems and productivity. The difference between what we were doing and what we get now is huge. And the Earthworkers, so this has been part of a mentoring that I've been doing with the For Love of Bees and Earthworkers, and here we're doing a field visual soil assessment, showing people how to sort of take soil samples and look at what they can actually see in their soils, and understand what they're actually looking at. In terms of understanding soil health, visual soil assessments are very useful. We also do, show people have various other different tools that we can do to assess soil health. One's a microbiometer, another one's, in this case, is both the bricks of a holding a refractometer and a bricks meter, which is reading the bricks from the plant sap, which is telling us about nutrient density, which is a very, very useful measurement, and more visual soil assessment that we're doing. In this case, it's in Kai Cycle this time, down in Wellington. and getting people to look. Part of the Earthworkers is also getting people to understand, and we do this in the farmers in the field as well, getting to look at their bed layout and understanding, where they potentially could achieve far greater inputs. And here in particular, we're looking at narrow beds versus wide beds, and the whole idea of having a much wider beds, creating less paths, is about increasing productivity overall. I think it's another Earthworkers course, outdoor class again at OMG, this time on a nice sunny day. And it's just again about understanding and talking with people about layouts and understanding the environment that they're growing in. The last shot here is of mentoring the For Love of Bees team. So working with For Love of Bees to improve their understandings and really getting them to do what we teach. Really look forward to working with more growers and looking at their individual projects, and the farmers of the field is certainly an excellent way to do that, for people to get an understanding of what it is that you're looking at, and potentially for our Earthworkers alumni, for those people who have done the course, to have that opportunity to have this further mentoring. I look forward to seeing you all there in the future. Thank you.
Kia ora. My name's Levi Brinsdon-Hall, and I am very, very excited to introduce myself and tell a little bit of my history and my story growing over the past 8 years, and why I'm super excited to be here mentoring with For the Love of Bees and Farmers in the Field. The first seed that I ever planted was about 8 years ago, and that was about a year or two after this photograph was taken. I came to growing through activism and through art school, and I really came to it through For the Love of Bees as well. So I've been involved with Sarah since the very early days. What you're seeing here is a photograph of myself, Sarah, Gabrielle, and a whole lot of school students. And this was taken at pasture painting, at a pasture painting workshop. So we used to grow flowers in public parks and use, we used to have beehives, and we used to use the space to educate anyone that wanted to be educated, but specifically school students. So early on in the For the Love of Bees days, I actually wasn't a market gardener then. I was working with Sarah and doing a lot of work with For the Love of Bees, planting out flowers in parks and teaching people about no-till methods of transforming green lawn spaces into abundant, biodiverse pollinator sanctuaries. So we can probably go next slide there, Catherine. At the same time as I was getting going with For the Love of Bees and doing volunteering, working in public parks and teaching stuff, I moved into this flat of mine in Grey Lynn, and the photo on the left there this was the second garden that I'd ever made, and that was what the lawn looked like when we moved in. And then really friendly landlords let us do basically whatever we wanted, and I basically started farming that, and for the 2 years that I was doing that really intensively with my beautiful partner Ella Rose as well, we set up, you'll see in the bottom left there's a bunch of greenhouses. I started sort of getting skills in propagation. This is about 6 years ago now, that photo on the right there. started getting good with propagation, and basically for the better part of 2 years, this was a real awesome learning space for me, and we didn't buy any vegetables from any supermarket, so that was really cool. Here's some pictures. So I got my mates there, Ella Rose and a bunch of mates, with a big hot compost pile, big static compost pile that we built together during a community working day. And on the right there, you can see photos of the kumara that we harvested from there. Did kumara, all kinds of edibles, and we also had beehives at the back. So this was around about when these photos were taken. This was before OMG even existed. OMG was just a lawn. This is what OMG looked like, and really at the start of it, so I was doing work with For the Love of Bees, and I was doing some landscaping work as well. And this was about the time when I made the decision that it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, okay, the world needs positive influence, and we need to be growing more plants, and we need to be doing ambitious things. And the opportunity came up through For the Love of Bees to sort of get stuck into this site here, OMG. And that was about 4.5 years ago. This photo was taken about 5 years ago, and it started off as that field, and we decided collectively, a crew of us, that we wanted to start an organic market garden. So here we have it, first season, OMG. I had done a bit of practice at my home garden in Grey Lynn. But yeah, we got off to a flying start. At the first season, I remember it quite vividly. We actually didn't even have water. I think it was like December, and we got water plumbed into the site, and then we were away. And we started off harvesting mainly for chefs and restaurants. In the early days, you'll see there's those mustard flowers there. So we'd sell to the French Cafe, we'd sell to Maisie Street, Lilia, some of Auckland's best restaurants, and we'd sell flowers for, $150 a kilo, and pea shoots and microgreens and radishes. And then we moved on to doing veggie boxes. So this was OMG in the beginning when we started that. It quickly got quite professional, because my dream and basically what I aspire to do in life is to create beautiful spaces that inspire people and empower them and motivate them to sort of see the impact that they can have in the world, and just really obviously what I'm trying to do every day of my life is to get people really excited at growing plants and living plants of diversity and growing their own food. So this is OMG, I think, in the summer of 2020 or something like that. And yeah, what you can see there is it's green, and we are occupying a whole lot of space. Since the journey of OMG, like, I came to it as a home gardener and as someone deeply passionate. But really what I've spent the last 4 years doing at this farm is really deeply learning and observing how we can farm multiple species in close proximity, intensively and productively to a CSA box system. So I've basically been obsessed with trying to perfect and learn as much as I can from how do we grow as much vegetables as great a diversity as intensely as possible. So that's really that. On the right there, you can see a lovely big harvest table photograph. So that's just a sort of a standard spring harvest for some boxes. And then actually that photo of me on the left there is super early days. Those are baby radishes, pea flowers and mustard green flowers going off to the French cafe. Yeah, so throughout the time at OMG, these images here sort of talk well to what I was talking about, but actually looking at what can we get away with in terms of what vegetables can we put close together. Some guilds work, some guilds don't. Yeah, I think I've just done a whole lot of experimenting and observation over the past 3 years, and set up all the farming systems here at OMG. Like we with volunteers, we've built the greenhouse that you can see there. We've built all the infrastructure, the harvest bay, the wash bay, and with the advice of so the team. So you can see there we've got Daniel Schuurman to the left. Daniel and I, we're looking very happy. Underneath that, we've got myself and an old farm assistant called Rhiannon, and then we've got on the right there we've got Estelle. So there's been so many people with me over this journey, and yeah, really we've sort of built it together. I've just had hundreds of people come through over the past sort of 4 years. I've met and made long-standing friendships. We've built, just so many static compost piles. We've seeded so many seeds, and yeah, just through observing it all, like I've really enjoyed being a market gardener. But really, the most important thing is, now that I've seen how it works and how incredible it is, the most important thing really is that we start getting this mode of horticulture out there into the world. So my main passion on top of growing is actually teaching and inspiring people how to create these spaces, these productive, beautiful spaces that not only enrich the soil and grow beautiful veggies, but they're creating community at the same time. So this is a photograph of me explaining to a whole lot of earth workers how to lay down a polyculture guild, an intensive polyculture guild, and what we're looking at there. I really do enjoy teaching these courses, and I love learning from all the participants, and just trying to get people to plant densely and diversely, and really push their ideas of what's possible. This here is late on in the game. I spent the first 2 years at OMG sort of doing all the stuff that farming entails. So I've basically the head farmer at OMG makes every single sale as well. But there came a point where I started looking at the planning systems. So that was about 2.5 years ago that I really started looking at how to plan how to take this farming system and actually turn it into a solid planning system, so that we can predict and look forwards, and we can basically have our guilds, once a bed comes to an end, we can then replace it with more seedlings. So here you'll see we've got a whole lot of cards, and again, this is like a crop planning game that myself and my good friend and long-time OMG volunteer Dan Kelly, we came up with this, organising the different species and the colour groups, and then just figuring out what we need to sow and when we need to sow it. So the OMG at the minute, Jake Clark is the farm manager there. I sort of was there for the first 3.5 years and got it set up, and now it's turning over. It's proving the point that we can do this. We can have these farms everywhere, and this is sort of the next, where we're at the minute is a photograph of me on the left there, looking a few years older than those earlier pics. And I'm with a really cool bunch of people down in Upper Hutt. Mahinga Kai is wanting, they're partnering with For Love of Bees to become a Centre of Regenerative Learning. And so here I am down here, mentoring this awesome team of people. And this was the first time that we met up, and yeah, I've actually recently been back down there, and we completely redesigned their garden bed, and yeah, this has been really empowering. So we've taken what was, I guess, a community garden, and we're really turning it into a high production urban farm that actually has the ability to produce upwards of 75 sort of CSA shares per week, because they have a lot of resources and a lot of land. And yeah, this has just been a really cool kind of journey. This is my journey through For the Love of Bees, and now I'm at the stage where I just want to help out and want to help out people to not make the same mistakes that I've had, that I've made, and really, yeah, just give people advice to make it, to make their experience with setting up these farms and these growing spaces as enjoyable and rewarding as possible. One of the main things that I emphasize is planning and rhythm in the farm. And yeah, super stoked to be here. Super stoked to be sharing what I've learned and what I've observed through the past 4 years. And yeah, that's a bit about me, basically. Hope you all enjoyed it.
If you are inspired to become an earthworker and learn more about regenerative organic horticulture, look up our Earthworkers program on our website to register for our upcoming courses. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us in making more, we welcome donations on our website, fortheloveofbees.co.nz. For the Love of Bees is a charitable trust creating a system of self-sustaining urban farms in Aotearoa that cultivate quality food for local people through regenerative organic horticultural practices that heal the ecosystem. Through these sites, we create happier and healthier ecosystems and resilient, connected communities. We also create and share high-quality, accessible educational experiences around what a truly regenerative world looks like. For the Love of Bees aims to become a world-leading example of partnership, regeneration and participation for a thriving collective future. We started in 2016 as an optimistic and love-centred approach to engaging with ecosystem well-being in a time of climate uncertainty.